Welcome to Fierce, Fit, Feminine, and Other F Words. I'm Christine Brunelli, and I help women unstuck themselves. Today's topic is anxiety, except it's not about our anxiety. It's about managing anxiety in children. So if you're a mom, or you're a school teacher, or you're someone who works with children on a daily basis, get settled in, because my guest and my personal friend I'm so thrilled for you to meet is Niki Brosnan, and she is the Kids Anxiety Solutions Specialist. But her story today starts with her personal journey through anxiety. It was undiagnosed when she was a child. Instead, she was told, you're just shy, or you're nervous, or you're a perfectionist. Well, fast forward a few decades later, and that undiagnosed anxiety turned into adult anxiety, depression, and chronic illness. While she was in her own healing journey of healing the anxiety, she was a school teacher in the inner city schools, and she noticed when she used some of her methods to help calm her anxiety to help her students, she saw a positive response. And that is how Kids Anxiety Solutions was born. And today, she helps moms or anyone who works with children learn tips, tools, and information on helping children manage anxiety. And she's going to share some of that today. Are you ready? Let's get started. Niki, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so grateful that you're willing to share your story and also solutions for moms with kids that have anxiety. Are you ready?
I am ready, and I'm so excited to be here. I just adore you, and I just can't wait to do this conversation with you.
Yay! Okay, so for my listeners, I love Niki. She lives in Mexico, my dream life, and we met online in a course that we took together, and it's been a love affair ever since. What I'm inspired by is your not just your knowledge of how to help kids, but your desire, your compassion, your ability to validate even me when I'm having a day, right? You just seem to how to know what to say. So you have so much to share. I don't want to take up too much time, but first let's just give my listeners a little background of who you are. What does your background look like? And how did that lead you into helping moms manage anxiety of their children?
Okay. Well, thank you. I grew up in a very abusive environment. So that's kind of where my story began. I was physically, mentally, and sexually abused from a very young age. And I dealt with it in a way that I dissociated. I numbed off and I closed down. And I also developed a very big streak of perfectionism. So my way to deal with it was to anticipate and do better and do better and do better and just kind of walk on eggshells all the time. And people back then, they didn't talk about, back in the olden days, they didn't talk about things like anxiety or anything like that. What I was told is that I was a perfectionist, that I was nervous, that I had a shy personality, and that's just how she is. And that's just how I thought I was. But I was also completely dissociated from my body this entire time. And as I got older, I went to university. I did all the things. I played basketball. I graduated with honors. I became a school teacher, and I was still in the shell of myself. I was very numbed off. I was still looking to others to see how I should react, how I should behave. And what was anxiety, as a childhood anxiety, became depression. It became adult anxiety, but it also became a lot of autoimmune disorders. So in my early 20s, I started aching and getting sort of like what felt like arthritis, which didn't make sense at all. I was active and healthy, and I ate healthy and did all those things, but my body was literally just couldn't deal with the stress anymore. And then as I was in the classroom, because I was fortunate actually, because as soon as I graduated, I went straight into the classroom, and I loved it. And it was one of the best experiences of my life. It was an inner city school. And it was tough. And so here I am.
What grade were you teaching?
At that point, it was a middle school. So that was grade 7, 8, 9. So my homeroom was grade 8 or 8th grade. And there was a lot of tough guys in that class. And, they had a tough background. And I was, fresh meat basically. And what I saw is just this way to deal with their stress. They were coming with all sorts of baggage, like all sorts of just devastatingly sad stories. And what I saw, and at the same time, I was developing an urge to kind of investigate my own healing journey. And so I was doing modalities like acupuncture, Chinese medicine. I got into meditation and yoga, and it was opening my eyes. And I was suddenly, for the first time in my life, resonating and coming back into my body. And so what I did is I took that into the classroom because I was a PE and science teacher. So in the PE classroom, or the PE gym classes, I would start bringing in a little bit of meditation, right? Just kind of sneaky, like we're doing our stretches before our run, and we're going to sit and just breathe for a bit. And what I saw was just these kids kind of just like sinking into their bodies a little bit more.
Wow.
The rough edges were just softening a little bit. And the more that I connected with them at a heart level, the more they allowed me to come in and the better their learning was. So these kids were literally coming into my classroom like in a defense mechanism, right? Like they'd had like a rough morning, a rough life, whatever was going on at home. And they were bringing that into the classroom.
Sure.
Of you're another stranger, I don't trust you.
Mm-hmm.
But as we started doing breath work, as they started to get to know that I wanted to know who they were, not just what I was teaching them, it was just this incredible like bridge where I was just seeing how on my healing path and their healing path and just seeing how that worked. And at the same time, I was introduced to something called ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences. And what that is it was done by a study done by Kaiser Permanente and the CDC about 20 years ago. And they look at 10 different categories of experiences of adversity that people are experienced during childhood. Things like physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, emotional and physical neglect, if you're being raised in a household with a parent with a mental illness, if there's substance abuse, incarceration, divorce, separation, domestic violence, natural disasters, or world events, for instance, a pandemic.
Oh.
And it shows the link. It shows the link between what you experience as a child and adult illnesses, disease, such as like not just anxiety anymore, not just depression, not just substance abuse, but things like heart disease. Now, heart disease is the number one killer of Americans right now in America. And it's linked to childhood adverse experiences, which to me is fascinating because, I mean, these are things that happen as a child that we kind of go, oh, kids are resilient. And so there's this resilience and everything. But what we look at is the more of those, and there's a quiz you can do, and I'll give you the link for it later on. It's numberstory.org. And you can go there and you can do your own quiz and you can look at how many childhood experience adversities you check off. And the more of those you have, the more likely you are to have things like heart disease, stroke, diabetes, asthma, as well as a whole host of autoimmune diseases. So the more I dove into it, the more I was like, this is happening. The more I went off my path of teaching and I was looking at like, how can we help people? And then I was coaching. I moved away from teaching and I started health and life coaching, which I loved, as well as teaching yoga. And I really loved it. But again, I was drawn back to kids. And so while I was teaching all these classes, I started teaching kids yoga. And I was looking at like how well they responded to things like breath work and meditation and simple things like that. And so I moved away from coaching adults and helping them heal to moving back to kids, because like kids have always been my passion. And just looking at how can we help kids deal with whatever they're experiencing now so that it isn't absorbed into their body and taken with them to adulthood. Does that make sense?
So good. So good. And they don't have 30 years of pattern, right? You can interrupt the pattern while they're still young, even if they're in middle school, even if they're in 9th grade, whatever. I mean, yes, they have. I grew up in domestic violence and the whole thing. So I'm so curious. I want to go take this quiz because I'm like, what am I going to be? But yes, it makes perfect sense. So you left. Did you leave teaching altogether in the school?
I did. Yeah. So I taught for 10 years and I loved the classroom and I loved teaching things beyond the regular curriculum. So I was always kind of pushing the envelope of how much more could I teach, but I really loved that. Like I said, the heart connection. I love finding ways to make real life applicable. Like how can we like teach them about goal setting and teach them about like personal development and that kind of thing rather than just
stuff they'll actually
I know. I know stuff that builds them up. Right. So,
right.
And I got to a place of, okay, I've gone as far as I can go down this route. And so once I started had my own kids, I wanted to leave the school system for that reason as well. And then that's when I got into coaching, and I've loved it ever since. And just working with kids, because the problem is when things happen to kids at a young age, their brains aren't fully developed. So those stress hormones that they're experiencing are being absorbed into their bodies in different ways. And it's so important that, maybe we can't prevent what's happened to them, but we can help them deal with what they're experiencing now. And it's so simple. I mean, the thing is, like, the science behind it, the brain science behind it is very complex, but the way to deal with what's happening isn't. It's simple things like meditation, breath work, exercise, eating a wholesome diet. All these little things make a huge difference in a child's life to how they grow and develop.
Okay. So I have a lot of questions.
Awesome.
I'm listening to you and I'm going, oh my gosh, so much good information. First of all, just thank you for noticing the child, right? When I can't think of anything better as a mom than having teachers in my children's life that noticed something and outside of the curriculum of what they were teaching and just said, you know what, I'm going to pull you aside. I'm seeing that. Anyway, teachers like that, I commend all of you, because that is a gift to us as moms. So if you're a mom listening, I'm sure you're thinking, wow, I wonder how young this work can help my child. What's the youngest? Like, my child's only 6. Do they have anxiety? How do I know? So I have a question about that. So, how do you identify if it's anxiety or just a bad mood, or if it's just their temperament, right? So can you speak to that a little bit? Because I know there are moms listening that might have maybe a 7-year-old and a 13-year-old, right? It's going to look different, but can a 7-year-old have anxiety?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's such a good question, because that's the tricky part, is kids don't express anxiety the way adults would, right? And what may look like a temper tantrum could be the result of, being overwhelmed. We can see stress as young as kids, 2 and 3 years old. And like things like separation anxiety, all of that is so crucial. And it's like, I'm a big fan of things like gentle parenting, because I think it's really important that we see the child as a whole being, right? And they're not out to get us. They're not out to make our lives difficult. They're not having a meltdown just to get their way. Right. They're giving us clues. They're giving us clues as to how they're feeling.
Feedback.
So things like, exactly. Feedback. So things like meltdowns, that could be a sign of anxiety. If your child was a good sleeper and suddenly they're waking up in the middle of the night with night terrors or nightmares, like consistently, that's anxiety. Things like normally being fine going to school and then suddenly not wanting to go, that's anxiety. But we have a tendency as adults to, and it's also our programming, and what we grew up with was like, you're fine, go to school, right? Whereas if you're an adult and your friend's saying, I just don't feel like I can go to work today. I feel anxious. I'm not sure what's going on. You'd say, take a day, stay home, check in with yourself, how you're feeling. No, we're sending those kids to school and saying, no, you're fine, and it's really crucial that we start just paying attention to those little things, right? If your child suddenly is freaking out about having to go to soccer and you don't know why, it's just check-in, right? And it's really important that we're just it's all about relationship building at the end of the day. You want to keep the line of communication open. You want them to be able to express to you how they're feeling and know that you're a safe place to listen and to feedback, right? So you want to come forward openly, come forward in a way that they feel they can express how they're feeling and that you're not going to judge them for it. And that's the real key, crucial part of it. And it does happen so young. I work with clients that have 2-year-olds that are experiencing stress and anxiety for a number of reasons. And it's just really important to just really observe your child.
Okay. So sorry if you heard a crash. My dog ran into a door and slammed it. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So can you give me an example of maybe what does it look like when you're actually interrupting an anxiety pattern? Maybe you could use your own children as an example. Can you tell us what it looked like, what you did, and what the result was, just to give a mom an idea because a lot of times mom is exasperated, right? The child's anxiety is causing mom anxiety. And then mom has to, as moms, we of course have to wear multiple hats. We have to go, okay, I can't be anxious. But a lot of times I'll tell you, when my kids were fighting in the backseat of the car and, everything was escalating, I would snap. I wasn't the best mom, right? So when we have a child that had, a true anxiety, I'm guilty. I would always say, you know what, that's just, sometimes, I didn't give the best advice. That's what I'm saying. So because it caused me anxiety, I was getting anxiety that my child was manifesting this stuff that, it was coming out in words that I was taught to say, just deal with it. Exactly what you just described. So can you give an example of how it works? What does it look like?
Right.
You want to help a child that is, you're noticing anxiety. Maybe first list off all the anxiety triggers, like what they could be, what might it be? And then how would you interrupt it? And what does it look like? And maybe you can give an example of how that worked with your own kids.
Right. Okay. That's such a good question. So I think the first part is that we need to remember that as moms, that we are human, right? We are human and we come with our own stuff. And you said it perfectly, we come with our own programming.
Right.
So, and the one thing that I think everyone can acknowledge is before you have a child, you can look at someone whose child's middle young and be like, my child would never do that, right? Like we have this holier than thou, like that would never, that's never what would happen.
That goes away after the first child's born.
Absolutely, right? But and then once we have that child, it's like something like that hard wiring that we were raised with and that has been passed down through generations, like comes into play, right? So your children in the back of the car and they're freaking out. And somewhere in the back of your mind, how your parents reacted is like what you tie into, right? So that's the first step. And that's the hard work because you have to go, okay, that's how my parents would have treated me or how they would have reacted in the situation. I'm going to choose a different path. And that is hard work. And I think that needs to be acknowledged. It's the most important work, I think, because you're changing the dynamics of your family tree. Basically, you're changing the dynamics of the generational curses or traumas or anything that may have happened to you. And it's a hard road. It's not easy. And I think, getting support, first of all, if that's something that sounds like it's resonating with you, you're going, yeah, like I would have been hit if that was the case. And I am not going to hit my child. But there's a gap there's the trigger and then there's the response. And in that middle part there, that's where the learning happens. So when you're triggered, it's that pause of just like, how will I react to this? Right. So there's that first part. And the next part is our kids. And our kids, first of all, are picking up on our anxiety because they are just watching and doing everything we do. Yep. And so here's an example of mine. And, I'm not proud of it because I did a lot of work before I had kids on my own anxiety, thank goodness. But I still chewed my nails. It was a habit I did as a kid. It was something I did. And it was so ingrained in me that when I was nervous, I would chew my nails. And I knew not to do it in front of my son. And I thought I wasn't doing it in front of my son. But lo and behold, there's my 2-year-old chewing on his nails. And so for me, that was super triggering. So I'm like, okay, so he's the happiest, go-luckiest kid in the world. And here he is chewing his nails. So that was a whole thing of me, like together, we stopped biting our nails and we chose different things.
How? I have to ask you, what'd you do? Because he was only 2?
He was only 2.
What did you do?
Because for him, it wasn't a habit yet. So we talked about it and he was 2 and it was just more of like, no, buddy. And I would just redirect. I would redirect all the time because he was so young. I've worked with other people whose kids are older and we do things like, just like make it like there was a mother-daughter where they made it a thing and they got their nails done together. So they were both going in, getting their nails, and it became like this mother-daughter date. So it wasn't something they turned to because they wanted their nails to look nice. So there's other ways to do it, but that I got lucky because he was 2 and I could redirect him quite easily.
Gotcha.
And I'm sure you noticed this too. Like my kids are night and day. Like they're just like so different from one another. So my son like I always say, when he was born, he was just like this ray of sunshine, like just like exuding love from like every pore in his body. And he was so happy and so like just joyous. And we joked, we call him the mayor, because when he was 2, he would go and wave to everyone. And like, he was so happy. And he still is a really happy kid. But I also know him well enough to know that he internalizes his stress and he internalizes his anxiety. So I have to kind of dig, and I have to be a little bit more investigative with him and be like, hey, how you doing? Like, what's going on with you? And again, open that channels. Now, my daughter was born in a fury. Like she wanted the whole world to know she was here. She like screamed for the first year of her life, like everything. So we like, again, as the parents of one child thought, oh, this is the kind of child we have, peaceful and quiet. No, we got the whole gamut. So my daughter, when she is in stress or trauma, she bolts. Like she not so much now because we've worked through it, but she would run. Like she would just look like a wild animal if she was stressed, or if she even like hurt her knee. If she fell and hurt her knee, she would get up and just want to sprint. So her trigger is to flight. Like she's just going to flee. And so I had to physically contain her. And so again, it was just about teaching her breath work, teaching her to just, feel what's happening in her body and slow down. Because the last thing you can do when anyone, a child, adult, anything, is when they're in the flight mode is to tell them to calm down. Right. And that goes for fight as well, because you just, if anyone, and I'm sure you've been in a situation where you're, not in a good way and someone says, calm down.
Yes, we hate that.
that's the last thing you're going to tell someone to do. Right. So the important thing is, your child. And that's why, like, I think it's so important. The work I do is working with the families, because the parents need to understand their kids' triggers. They need to be able to look at their child and say, oh, you're about to have a meltdown because you didn't get the cereal you wanted. Okay. So let's like look at that trigger, and how are we going to stop it before it becomes a full meltdown? Okay. And it's what we want to do is create a toolbox, right? Create things that they need to do, because it's like a muscle, right? And it's, like I said, the brain science is complicated. The practice is easy. So what you need to do though is like I was a basketball player. So we had to go and shoot 100 free throws every single day, so that it became just repetitious, right? Our muscles knew what to do, so that in the middle of a big game, it was easy. Like our minds and our bodies knew what to do. It wasn't even a matter of thinking about what to do. You just stood on the line, lined up, and shot the ball. Right. And the same thing goes with anxiety tools, is you just want it to be something they do. So when they're at school and they can feel the butterflies in their stomach, and they have to write a test and they're feeling really shaky, they just go, I remember, I just need to breathe, and they just sit and breathe, because it's part of their learning. And like, again, I feel that every school needs to be getting much deeper into this kind of emotional intelligence teaching, because this is like the bridge we need for the kids. We need them to be able to see what's going on in their body and how they need to react, because we are all different, right? Some kids just need to sit and draw out their feelings, draw what's going on in their body, and then they're okay. Mm-hmm. Some kids need to get out and run around. They need to run a lap of the field and just get it out of their body. Yes. And we're all different, right? And like the thing with me growing up in my abuse, I would look at people who thrived, who were just kind of like, you're not going to knock me down. And I was always like, why couldn't I have been like that? Like I was more just like get kicked to the ground and say, stay down. I'm like, okay, I'll stay down, versus no, I'm going to get up. Like I'm going to keep going. And so we need to acknowledge that kids have different personalities. They have different, we all do. We all do,
Okay. I have questions. Sorry.
Awesome.
You're
no,
so
please.
much good information. Okay. First of all, I love you just give them something else to do. Redirecting was huge, but knowing the triggers. My son, when he was young, I learned that, if we had friends over and they had play dates, or if we went somewhere and they were having so much fun, let's just say we were at the beach and they were flying kites or whatever, when it was time to leave, it wasn't just, I don't want to leave. It was full on, looked like a temper tantrum, didn't want to leave. And I learned that he needed, now this was, 4 and younger, maybe 5, he needed time to transition. Mm-hmm. So what I noticed was, if I give him a warning that we're going to be leaving, he would acclimate to the idea. So I would start 30 minutes out. And we're going to be going in a little while. And then, maybe 20 minutes. Okay, you only have a few more minutes. And, like I would work it down, and lo and behold, it worked. And somebody told me, transition time for little ones is a big deal because they love what they're doing. They don't want to stop. Don't interrupt what they're doing. It's too much fun. That little thing worked. And that was an anxiety right inside him, some form of anxiety. He doesn't like change to this day. This person, right? But learning how to manage it as a mom, of wow, this little one tip changed everything. Just the transition. Give him a 30-minute every 10 minutes. Keep telling him we're going to be leaving, so that by the time it is time to get in the car and leave, we're not fighting with them, because it always happens. Niki, am I right? It happens when you're in a hurry to go. Right?
Always, yeah.
Not now.
Yes.
Like, this is a long time. So that was so key for me.
Yes.
So what, I still don't know though, when I look back, and I don't know if it's important for a mom to know what the triggers are or what causes the trigger, or is it just more important to recognize the trigger and know how to manage it? Because there's so much to this. This is more than just, helping us get in the car so that we can leave on time. This is a lot of deep work, because my daughter, as you know, she developed a severe case of anorexia in high school. And I would say she was the one that did not wear her emotions on her sleeve. She stuffed it. And she was the kid that was the 4.0. She was the kid that overachieved and all of these things. But after she was in therapy for her eating disorder, I had a flashback. When she was 8 years old, she had a guinea pig named Gunther, after Gunther on Friends TV show. So she was holding Gunther, and she said, "Mom, is it weird that sometimes I just want to squeeze him really hard till his eyes pop out?" And I looked at her like, my daughter's a murderer, like a murderer. Like, what the heck? And I said, "Well, I can give you a squishy, like one of those rubber squishy balls if you want to do that. But you can't do that to Gunther." And she's like, "I know, but I have this urge." And you know what? I didn't make a connection that was anxiety. So someone trained in anxiety would have seen that right away and go, "Girl has anxiety." She has this desire to like make a fist really hard and squeeze. I didn't know what it was from. I don't know the root of it. I just knew she had it. And I did a very poor job at teaching her how to manage it because I didn't know. And then years later, it manifested as an eating disorder, because eating disorders are a form of anxiety. So as a mom, this really speaks to me. Now, my kids are in their 20s, so I can't, I can't go back and, redo. But if we have any listener here with children, you have time.
You do.
So where do moms learn how to identify the triggers and learn how to manage the triggers? Are there books that you would recommend before we send them to you? I mean, is there any material out there? But because there are so many gurus on the internet that are doing stuff, right? Is there any information that would help them even in the diet? I know that certain food colorings have been anxiety. There's so much to anxiety that is not an underlying mental health issue. It could just be dietary. So where does a mom start?
Whew. Okay. Well, so first of all, there are so many good books, and I'm probably I don't have a list in front of me. So what I'll do is I'll send you a list and you can put it into your notes, your show notes, because there are some really, really good books. And also the first thing I want to say is, you need to really, be kind to yourself too, because even 20 years ago, no one talked about childhood anxiety. When I was teaching, people didn't talk about childhood anxiety. Like when I think of the conversations in the staff room at the school I taught at, and there was good teachers. I'm not saying that but it was just, kids were expected to conform and be a certain way. It's just in the last, I want to say like 10 years, maybe, that we're allowing kids, allowing the gentle parenting movement and all of that to really take hold, because, gentle parenting used to be kind of this they're just hippie parents with, no boundaries or anything. And it's actually the complete opposite, because it's about doing the work as a parent. It's about looking at how you were raised and doing differently and making that conscious decision. So go gentle on yourself because this is all super new. So I'll get you those books. But yes, you touched on something that's really important too, and it's nutrition. And we're seeing like American diet is sad, right? It's a sad diet. And kids are being stuffed full in cafeterias and their school lunches, everything, with just foods that are just breeding anxiety. And, our kids are stuffed full of things like antibiotics and everything that are killing their gut health.
Yes.
And I could talk to you for a whole episode just about that. But what we need to do is we need to look at ways to nurture even that, because there is a huge link between gut health and children's anxiety as well. And they're just finding more and more ways that what we're feeding our kids is just perpetuating this anxiety in their day-to-day life. Food coloring, you hit on it, nitrates, all the preservatives, all the chemicals. Like if you're giving your kid that has a list of 20 ingredients and full of sugars and full of dyes and all of those things, that is not good for them. That is not nurturing their diet. They need to be eating things that are like prebiotics, like asparagus, apples, kohlrabi. I can't think of any of the other things that kids really like to eat that's on it, but apples for sure. Probiotics, they need to really get them a really good high quality probiotic that's going to build that bacteria in their belly, and then give them a whole foods diet. Make sure they're eating greens or drinking greens and eating high quality proteins. All those things are going to help reduce your child's anxiety. A diet of fast food is going to do nothing but contribute to their anxiety as well. So that's really important.
Good. So good. And I love that. I'm passionate about that. And I've spoken about nutrition on previous episodes, but that even affects adults, right? So all of that applies. And I'm so glad that you gave us a few tips about that. So I want to roll into something that's really current, and that is the effect of the pandemic on children. And we have so many things where this is divisive and it's political and all of that. I want to lay that aside and explore what your experience and what you're seeing and moms, if you're listening, I know you're seeing it because we talk to moms whose children have anxiety. I just spoke to someone who has a college graduate who lived in LA during the lockdown and did everything. Her last year in college or 2 years in college was all online. And, LA was super strict, and she came home with true COVID fear. It's a true COVID anxiety. I think they're actually creating a diagnosis code for it now so that it's treatable. She's afraid to go in public. She's afraid to see people. She's all of these fears. And this is a college graduate. So I want to talk to you about the little ones and the effect on them. What are you seeing? And what do you see as management for it?
Yeah, this one's really, really tough to watch because our kids are being affected. It's 1 in 4 kids now are being diagnosed with severe anxiety. Not just talking about, they can't, they have the occasional nightmare. This is severe anxiety. And you have it, they have agoraphobia. They're deathly afraid of germs because we've programmed into them. And for me, that the moment when I went, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Was we were living in Nashville, and when the pandemic hit, my daughter was 3 and her life was the park. We went to the park every day and she wanted nothing more to be pushed on the swings for it seemed like hours. That was the thing she wanted to do for the entire time. And we drove by and the park workers were taking the swings down and putting the yellow tape around it. And I just looked in the back seat and she just had this tear running down her face. And I just went, oh my, this is her world. I mean, we have kids who have spent, the majority of their lives in quarantine, who have been told that they're not allowed to go into a shop unless they wear a mask, and they have to put this gel on their hands and don't touch this and don't touch that. And you can't do this. And, they're going to school and they're being social distance and they're told they can't go outside and play at recess and they're not allowed to play on the slides and the swings and just all the things that we know that are going on. They can't high five their friends. They can't hug. I mean, we are human beings. We thrive on touch and connection. And suddenly you're staring at this person at the front of the room and you can't see their mouth moving. Kids read emotions through facial expressions. They learn through facial expressions of, am I allowed to do that? Am I not allowed? Suddenly they can't see that. So it's so vast. And again, we could talk for another hour just about this, but it's the crisis state. The US deemed last October that our children's mental health is now a national emergency. And I get chills all over my body when I say that, because people are still so stuck on the stigma behind, oh, my child doesn't have anxiety. Are you talking kids don't have anxiety? Our children have anxiety and they are suffering.
Yes.
And we need to step up. We need to do these simple things, like I keep saying, like, what's the worst case scenario? If you truly feel that your child hasn't been affected, and that, these massive milestones like graduation and birthday parties and sporting events and everything that they know and believe to be part of who they are, they weren't allowed to do. If you truly believe that isn't affecting your child in any way, just give it a go. Teach them some meditation, teach them some breath work. The worst case scenario is you're giving them a toolbox that they can use into their adult life, because what adult hasn't experienced anxiety?
Yes.
And somewhere that's more accessible, that's more acceptable to say, yes, of course adults have anxiety. Of course we do. But we won't allow ourselves to let go of our ego and say, my child needs help. And that makes me feel really sad.
It is so sad to watch. I mean, it breaks my heart. And teachers, I know quite a few teachers in elementary school through high school age, and they've all said the children and the older students are 2 years behind emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
They're stunted. And they also are still living in fear. Like because the parents were fearful, the children are fearful. That is anxiety, right?
Yes, yes.
I had a little girl who was told, a little girl neighbor, maybe 7 years old, I have a 12-pound Havanese puppy, right? And he ran out into my neighborhood, right into like a little cul-de-sac area. And he ran to her because he loves kids and he wants to say hi. And he's just wiggle with his tail. And I, of course, didn't want him to run in the street. And I was trying to grab him, but she said, just stood there like straight, arms straight. And she said, I can't touch your dog because they told me I could give animals COVID and they'd die. And you sunk. I don't have the authority to speak into this child's life, right? All I wanted to say was, you can touch my dog anytime, right? Because he's a little therapy dog in himself.
Right. Of course.
And like he would totally break all of those fears in her. But just that one little exposure for me to see how little children are being taught and what they're learning, it's devastating. And what now, because what can you do as a mom? So let's say mom is okay. She's ready to move on and move through out of the pandemic and into old school normal life, like the before times, but child is still scared. Is there anything mom could do to help the child move through that, to drop some of that anxiety?
Yeah. So again, it comes back to the conversations, allowing your child to know that you're a safe space, and asking, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How does it feel when you wear a mask? How does it feel when you're at school? And not to ask the questions like it's a yes or no answer, because kids will just say yes or no if that's what you do. But you need to say, how does it make you feel when you go to school wearing a mask? How does it feel when you're not allowed to go see your friend because they're in quarantine? Like, have those conversations and allow them to just express it. And the problem with adults at times is that we try to rationalize our children's feelings through an adult brain, which children don't have the logic. Like, logical brain isn't fully developed until a child is 25. So in our adult brain, we can be looking at our child and saying, what are you doing right now? Like, this makes no sense. Like, what you're doing doesn't make sense. To them, it does, because they're, so it's seeing the world through their eyes. It's developing that. It's finding books. And again, I have a whole list of kids' books that I'll send you that you can put in your show notes as well. Like, it's picture books that I feel are really important for kids, just to open up the conversation, to say like, oh, what I'm feeling in my body right now, that's a worry. Okay, I know what that is. Because they don't have the vocabulary. What they do have is that I feel sick. I have a tummy ache.
Yeah.
I have a headache. I can't sleep. My heart's racing. They can give words to that, but they may not know what worry is, or they may not know, like, anxiety is a big word. So that's a bit of a tougher one, but allowing them, and I love teaching through picture books because I feel like it's a very good way for kids to go, oh, I can relate to that.
Perfect.
So it's fun. Yeah, it's fun in these little ways.
I noticed on your social media, it's one of my favorite videos I saw that you posted. And if you want to follow Niki, it's Kids Anxiety Solutions on both Instagram and TikTok. Wonderful material. You will love her. Go follow her. Kids Anxiety Solutions is her handle. But you have one video, I think you recently posted, where you're blowing bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
That must be a technique you can use to teach them breath work. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite, actually, because what kid doesn't love bubbles? And
Right.
you literally can't be stressed and blow bubbles at the same time because it's a really good, again, it's a mindfulness technique. And it just allows you, one, you have to concentrate, but also the movement of pursing your lips to breathe and breathe the bubbles out. Your air is leaving slowly. So it's slowing down, it's calming down your nervous system. So you're breathing deep into your belly to get that big air in before you blow it out. And then as you purse your lips, the air goes out slowly. And it's just like massaging your entire nervous system.
Oh,
so
good.
Yeah. And you can't be thinking about what's happening tomorrow or what happened yesterday when you're blowing bubbles, because you're literally just concentrating on that bubble blowing.
That's true. You know, one of the techniques I used for my kids when they were young, but I even did it when they were teenagers and they thought I was nuts. But this is another one. You can't not smile when you're skipping.
Yes.
It's true. Like you can't, even as an adult, I was on vacation with a friend and they were just so bummed out. They were getting over a breakup and I forced them. I said, you are going to skip with me. We're going to skip down this sidewalk as full-blown 40-year-olds, right?
Yes.
Feeling absolutely insane and ridiculous, but you can't not smile and it breaks the pattern, right? So it breaks the pattern and it helps.
Exactly.
And
totally.
all we can do is to alter the brain chemistry, even just a little bit. It helps minimize the anxiety. So for older kids, you're not going to get a 16-year-old to skip. It's just they're so resistant a lot of times.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How do moms with teenagers deal with this?
Yeah, teenagers are a whole new kettle of fish there. So
you can't. Is there anything you could leave a mom with teens that might have anxiety, like leave them with some hope that they might be able to break through?
Well, first and foremost, like I just coming back to communication, right? Like it comes back to that. Like they have to know that you're a safe space, that they can say, whatever they need to say, and you're not going to and this is really, really, really important with parents because, and especially moms, is please don't make it about you, right? So like our first reaction is to, one, be like, well, that doesn't make sense. Or two, like how, or just try to find a way to make it like something's about our fault. It's not about you. So you want to maintain that boundary of this is your child, your teenager experiencing these emotions, and you need to listen and just be there for them to be a sounding board. And they need to know that you're a safe sounding board, that you're not going to judge them. Or, it's even like as an adult, right? Sometimes when we're in it, the worst thing we can do is, express ourselves to someone and have someone say, well, do you know what you could do? Right? Because you don't always want the answer. And teenagers are like that too. Sometimes they just need to express it, and then rather than saying, well, have you tried this? Just say, do you want me to listen? Would you like a solution? Or do you just need to vent to get this out?
Love that. That's so good. Because and sometimes I think, at least I noticed this with my kids, when my daughter was in the peak of her anorexia, she was in a shell. She was a vault. You couldn't crack it. She didn't want to talk about anything. She had therapists for that, right? She wasn't going to come talk to me. But if I was patient with her and just, you can always come to me, I just want you to know, I'm here. And I would check in and say, how's it going today? What do you know?
Yeah.
She didn't answer me for maybe the first 2 weeks. And then by week 3, so I had to be patient.
Yes.
Building the trust because it does take time for teenagers to unlock.
Definitely. And then, so that's really great too, is so you had to do like the prep work before you went and talked to your daughter. So you had to say, okay, she may not say anything and I need to be okay with that, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to keep at it. So that's fantastic. Yeah. And then it's stuff too, like just like making sure they have an outlet to exercise, really encouraging meditation. And the best way we can show, get them to do meditation is by modeling it ourselves. if they see that it's something that you do, and they might just make fun of it or whatever, but there's other ways around it. One thing that I've just been experimenting with my tween is an app called Calm. And I don't love things that are on the screens, but it's so good because sometimes my son also has dyslexia, and which can also add to his anxiety. But the app itself has like soundscapes and stories, bedtime stories, and that sort of thing, where it's just someone else or something that they can just listen to and just, again, decompress and just be quiet and be still. And another great idea with tweens and teens is drawing, draw out your feelings, especially if they have a creative edge, just allowing them to draw, encourage journaling, because getting it out of their head is so key. So any sort of journaling movement, and just not on their phones or their computers, but actually pen and paper, just writing it out, getting it, teaching them that, if there's something you want to get out of your head, write it out. Let's crumple it up. Let's throw it in the fireplace and burn it and watch it go. Those kind of little things really add up to allowing them to be able to express themselves and just say, maybe you can't say it to me, but maybe you can write it out. And then let's just get rid of it. Let's get it out of your head. Yes.
So good. Mm-hmm. I love this. Wow. This has been so, I feel like we could go for hours. There's so much more we could cover. We could dive into nutrition. Would you be willing to come back and talk about that someday?
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah.
Oh, it'll be so good. So let's talk about how my listeners can find you and get more information and what they'll learn when they follow you.
Oh, thank you for that. So I'm straight across the board, Kids Anxiety Solutions. So on Instagram, Kids Anxiety Solutions, one word, TikTok, Kids Anxiety Solutions. My website is www.kidsanxietysolutions.com. Perfect. And what you can find is, I try to make it as valuable as possible. My DM box, my mailbox is always open. If you have questions, if you have concerns, I just, I want to make it a safe community where people can support each other and just know that you're not alone while you're trying to solve your child's stress and anxiety. And you'll find tips, you'll find tools, you'll find more brain-based learning type things. I do silly dances sometimes, all those kind of things, because it's serious work, but the best way is to just have some fun with it and to just remember that these little beings, they are your heart and soul. And I know that at the bottom of everything, every parent just wants the best for their child. And it's just finding a way to do it, because these kids did not come with manuals. They did not come with, a list of instructions of what to do at every age. And a lot of us are just learning as we go. So it's really important that I feel that, I want to offer that safe space. And I just welcome you all to come and just see what's on there.
So good. Oh, Niki, thank you so much for being here today. You have taught me some new things. I'm sure my listeners have learned something new. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So good. Isn't she incredible? Niki is so amazing that when this interview was over, she said, "Oh my goodness, Christine, I forgot to talk about the family calendar. Will you please share this with your listeners?" Well, of course I will. So she explained that if you use a large family calendar where it's in plain view for everyone to see, all children, and write the week schedule on it as well as upcoming events, that little tool right there helps minimize some anxiety in children. Get a family calendar, plaster it somewhere big enough where everyone can see what's going on and coming up for the week. She also gave me a list, a mini library of books that you can find and read on managing anxiety, from young ones all the way to teens, that will be listed here in the show notes. You can find Niki at kidsanxietysolutions.com, and that's also her handle on Instagram and TikTok, Kids Anxiety Solutions. I sure hope you enjoyed this episode. She is getting ready to create a digital course where you'll be able to study with her and learn more from her. And if you do follow her on social or find her on her website, send her a message of what you would like to learn, because she is creating that content for you right now. If you're still here listening to me, I want to thank you for being here. You are why I'm here every week. And if you have not subscribed, don't forget to hit subscribe so that you get notified the next time an episode is released, because we're all about women helping women at Fierce Fit Feminine. So until next time, my friend, have a fierce, fit, feminine, and fabulous day.